Folks, thank you for being here. We're delighted to have you all. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from technology leaders. We do this series, the TechTalk Series, once a quarter. We try to fit it in between our academic terms so that our students and our faculty have an opportunity to attend. We've done this for about a year now. I've had some great speakers on, and we're about to have another one. I have had the blessing of having worked with Ms. CeCe Morken for several years at my last employee at Digital Insight. She and I have numerous mutual colleagues with whom I share a great bond. And so I'm grateful to her for coming and speaking with us tonight. She'll be talking about the broad topic of technology and mental health. And she has all sorts of interesting things, I'm sure, to share about that and exercises she'll work us through. I also invite you to ask questions. So as questions arise, feel free to post those in the chat. Diana will aggregate those and offer those to CeCe as we get toward the end. So she'll have some words to share with us, and then she'll take questions as she sees fit. And if we have time, we'll take some live questions as well. So before we go on to CeCe, let me offer an opportunity for my boss, Dean Gerhard Affalthaler, to speak a bit about the programs at Cal Lutheran and anything else you may want to say as well. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Whitman, for this opportunity to say a few words. A special thanks actually goes to Dr. Whitman because he's currently on a study trip with students in Iceland. So I assume it's what, 3 o'clock in the morning over there? Yeah. So thank you for being with us, and also many thanks to Diana Fielding, who in the background manages this event series. As a School of Management, of which the MS in Information Technology program is part, we are not only offering programs, excellent programs, of course, and curricula and degrees, but we also understand as a modern business school that we are here to provide value to our community in the form of events that keep our stakeholders informed about current and future trends and to bring interesting people to you through various channels and media and events. And so thank you, everybody. You are the community. Thank you, everybody who signed on today for this exciting event. And a particular thanks to CeCe Morken, who comes to us from Headspace with a very timely and very interesting topic, and is going to lead a conversation on technology, mental health, and leadership. And with that, thank you, everybody, and over to you, CeCe.
Thank you so much, Gerhard and Paul. It's such a delight to be able to see Paul again and have a chance to work with him again. So I was just tickled that he invited me to participate in this. So I am the CEO of Headspace, and we are a mental health and wellness company where we believe that taking care of our minds is just as important as taking care of our physical bodies. And in that vein, I would like to get this session started with a very brief meditation breathing exercise for all of us. And I have my counterpart, Whitney, joining us to help me with some of this. So Whitney, would you launch a breathing exercise for us?
So once you're sitting comfortably, just taking a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, focusing on the lungs filling with air. As you exhale, just gently closing the eyes as you feel the weight of the body press down. And as you pause, just noticing where in the body you feel the breath right now. So you're not going to breathe in any special way. Instead, we're going to listen or notice the natural rhythm of breathing, noticing whether it's fast or slow, whether the breaths are short or long. If you can't feel any movement in the body at all, just gently placing your hand on your stomach. And just resting the mind on that rising and falling sensation. And nothing else to do, nothing else to think about. Allowing thoughts to come and go. And just resting the mind on the breath. And when you're ready, you can just gently open the eyes again.
Thank you, Whitney. So we wanted to start with that just to give a taste of how that starts to be a part of people's lives. Now at Headspace, we actually start our all hands with a meditation, and we have no meeting times during the day so that people can actually take care of their minds, because people get tired of being on Zoom all day. And just some interesting pieces of how this is starting to show up. Microsoft embedded us into Teams so that you can actually start to use AI to sense that Paul has been on too many meetings today, and that it might be time for him to either stand up and take a walk or to do some breathing exercises. And we work with CEOs in very large enterprises to try to get them to understand how to change the habits of their employees so that we start to incorporate taking care of your mind in addition to taking care of your physical body. And I'm going to just note right now that my dog is now starting to make noise, and hopefully it won't bother everyone else. So my work today really centers on the intersection of mental health and technology, which is part of the reason I was so excited to be able to share some thoughts and some insights with you, especially with people who are in the technology space, because I think that's where we have an opportunity to change the state of affairs with mental health. I'm going to share with you some context on mental health, some insights on AI and ML, recognizing that you all are much smarter than me in that area, but mainly start to tell the story of the possibilities when you bring those things together, on how we can change mental health. Now, in some cases, I am going to be talking about Headspace, but that's only to bring this to light because these are real scenarios. And then at the very end of my discussion, I'm going to make just a brief pitch that if you're ever interested in joining Headspace, we are literally hiring lots and lots of engineers. So we'd welcome you joining us. So as it relates to mental health, I'm going to share with you three problem areas that exist today, which is the stigma surrounding mental health, the lack of access, and the high cost of mental health. And next slide, please. You may know this, but the problem of mental health is really significant. If you see 1 in 13 Americans, and it's even more challenging for those who have the least access or the least capability to get help, those in underserved markets. In addition, it's really a challenge in our youth. So 1 in 7 children have a diagnosable mental health condition. And rather than me just talk about it, I have a couple video or audio clips that I'd like for you just to hear from some people how it feels to them. And if you could click, let's just listen to 2 of them, Whitney.
Well, even when I would tell my parents like I'm depressed, they really wouldn't listen to me. So I never really had any support.
My main sources of anxiety and stress and depression first of all, comes from COVID, because we are all isolated from one another. It's really lonely. And I don't get to see my family members very often.
You know, and I think when you hear the actual voices, you can start to just feel how bad that is. And one of the things, I know I talked about 1 in 13 Americans, but the majority of 50% of us will have a diagnosable mental health condition in our lives. 60% of those will go untreated. And when that happens, that leads to more severe cases of things like depression. Now, we don't talk, and you heard the first woman say this, we don't talk that much about mental health until this year. And we've started to talk about it more, and that's where the stigma comes into play. If you could go to the next slide. One of the things that I'm encouraged about is actually hearing prominent figures, and these are, you know, best in class world athletes now coming forward and talking about the stigma of mental health and how much it weighs on them. And let me play one more video, if you could, for Michael Phelps.
We're humans, right? We're human beings. Nobody is perfect. So yes, it is okay to not be okay. It is okay to go through ups and downs and emotional roller coasters. You know, but I think the biggest thing is we all need to ask for help sometimes too when we go through those times. You know, for me, I can say personally, it was something that very challenging. It was hard for me to ask for help. I felt like I was carrying, as Simone said, the weight of the world on your shoulders. So yeah, it's a tough situation.
Thank you. You know, this year we've started to hear people talk more about it, but we've still got a long ways to go. There's still a stigma associated with it, but the more people like this start to talk about it, the more it becomes okay for others to talk even more about it. And one of the problems, even when we start to talk about it, is the cost of mental health. If you look at the affordability that rests with this, this costs $10,836 a year. The average American has less than $400 available for an emergency, and an average therapy session is between $65 and $250 for one session. On top of that, there is a lack of availability or shortage of qualified therapists to help people. So even if they could afford it, we don't have enough people to spread around. And so next slide, please. When we've been thinking about it, this whole industry, it comes up to these three problems: acceptance, which is stigma, the affordability, which is the cost, and then the access, which is the shortage of humans. And next slide. To us and to me, there's a bit of a different way to think about mental health, because the fact is we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. It's just a matter of where we are on this continuum. We might be in the prevention and promotion stage, which is a lot of where Headspace has been, but we also will move it down the continuum where we might need some additional help. And then we are talking about curation or critical condition management. And through our lives, we don't stay in one place. We will move up and down the continuum, but every single one of us on this call is somewhere on this continuum. So now let me start to talk about technology and how technology might impact mental health. And specifically, I'm going to talk about AI. So I'm talking to a group of technologists. And so when we would bring up AI, this might be how you think about it: advances in neural networks and super interesting nodes. But on the next slide, this is how an economist thinks about AI. An economist thinks about AI from the standpoint of what does it lower the cost of? And I have the opportunity to work very closely with AJ Agrawal, who's a professor at the University of Toronto, very closely. We sit on the same board together. And he has really taught me a lot about AI. And AI is all about prediction, using data to generate information that we don't have, but using AI to lower the cost of prediction. Thank you. Next slide, or this slide's perfect. And it's already being applied in so many different areas that are super, super interesting. So we see it used in driving, which it's really predicting what would a human do at this intersection. In fact, it was part of what was on 60 Minutes last night. with semi-truck drivers, which is a little nerve-wracking. It's used for email replies. I don't know how many of you use the automatic reply in LinkedIn or in email, but it saves us time. And then think about it for a loan officer, reducing a lot of the tasks that a loan officer did in a credit decision to make the credit decision for them. And what does it do? It lowers the cost of a loan. And because of that, next slide, there's this big race to be the biggest. And the reason that there's a big race to be the biggest is because the more data that I have, sorry about the dog, the more data that I have, the smarter my predictions become, because I feed this into the AI models, and the better my prediction is, the more users I have. And so the circle continues, the more data that I have. And all of this helps us to lower the cost of AI. And sorry, I'm not quite there yet, Whitney. And the reason that matters is if you lower the cost of something and you have the very best, then who wants to use the second best? And I liken this to self-driving cars. So if you have the lowest priced and the best, most accurate self-driving car, the question we ask is, who's the lawmaker that's going to say it's okay for the second or third most accurate self-driving car to be approved? I don't particularly want to drive in that car. And then Whitney, go ahead to the next one. This is a great example of that. And if I could see everybody's face, I'd ask how many of you use the search engine Bing? And my guess is I wouldn't see a lot of hands raised. And the reason is because Google is so good at it and it's free. So why would you use the second best if you've got the lowest cost right there for you? And that's that feedback loop that gets it smarter and smarter. And they do a great thing because they've got the, are you feeling lucky? And I don't know how many of you use that, but if you do the I'm feeling lucky, you only get one response. But see, most people don't do that. So you get the 10 responses back with a bunch of ads, which is annoying. But with the 10 responses back, the one I picked just teaches it to get smarter and smarter. And so now let's apply this to mental health, because this is where I think it starts to become really, really interesting, because there are so many new signals that are now available that can enable us to digitize our state of mind. And all of these sources of data, our speech, our voice, our keyboard strokes, the faces that we make, sensors, all of these are signals that can train AI. And I'll give you an example of that with keyboards on the next slide. This is, to me, fascinating that we can now make correlations of biomarkers with depression constructs that have been found using keyboard metrics. And you can see on here some of the areas that we've been able to have an impact on. And it's really, really interesting because in this construct, we're not asking the human to give us any information on their own. The next thing that's interesting is let's start to talk about the role of clinicians. So the fundamental role of a clinician is diagnosis. And what is diagnosis? It's a prediction. But unfortunately, next slide, humans make a lot of errors, a ton of errors in predicting conditions for humans in both physical and mental well-being today. And one of the things that's so interesting is that when an AI makes a prediction, it continues to get smarter because it learns if it was wrong. But as humans, a very unfortunate thing happens, which is we become confident. And when we become confident, our internal AI doesn't continue to learn. And that's what ends up being the cause of so many errors in diagnosis. And Whitney, the next slide. And this one is just showing how AIs have been able to predict either on par or even better than professionals in both physical and mental disorders, which again, I think can be super interesting as we move forward. Now, while AI won't fully replace therapists, and you can see some quotes here, and by the way, if you haven't read Deep Medicine, I think it's a great book. And we don't think it will ever replace therapists. What it can do is make them more effective by giving them better information so that they can make better predictions, or it will enable them to be free from the lower acuity cases and allow them to focus on the more serious cases. And this is how we start to address accessibility and the short supply of coaches and therapists. Now, this whole area is starting to explode. And so I've got on here just some of the startups in this field specifically with AI for mental health, and it's enormous. And if you can see the number in the orange box, it just blew my mind that it's predicted to be 120 billion by 2028. It's just enormous, the opportunity that's in front of us. So next slide. From our standpoint and my standpoint, where we see an opportunity is this intersection of science, which is the credible expertise that happens by applying certain kinds of routines that have efficacy, proven solutions to reduce stress, anxiety, depression as examples. Data, which is the data that comes through all of the sensors or self-reported information that continuously feed these feedback loops, and then content, which is the content that is used to actually be the cures or management of these chronic conditions. And I'll give an example of that in just a minute. And as a result, when we apply AI and machine learning, there's several things that we're now able to do, which is evidence-based interventions, which leverages the science. And again, I'll show you an example, but this is starting to recommend the right intervention at the right time based on sensors. Personalized care pathways, which guide, Paul through one pathway, me through a very different pathway, just based on what we need on that continuum that I talked about of mental health that we all have. And then a stepped care approach that moves us back and forth on that continuum. And then from our standpoint, what's really important is being able to constantly measure, are we actually making a difference for people? Are we reducing their stress and anxiety so that we can keep them out of the depression state or something even worse? And I thought what I would do now is tell a quick story, and then I'll be able to wrap up. The story I'm going to tell is something that our team put together last summer. And so when I got to Headspace, we didn't have a lot of use of AI, and I thought it was important for us to bring in, and I'd worked with it quite a bit at Intuit. And so they began to put together a story that is now what we're delivering. And so I'm going to walk you through a quick storyboard for someone named David. And Whitney, I go kind of quick, so I'll just say next slide when it's time. So next slide. So in this story, and bear with me, this is something we used internally, so it's a bit Headspacey, so hopefully that's okay. But David started working for an employer who offered Headspace as an employee benefit. He'd heard of it, so he starts to use Headspace. Next slide. And as he looked at what was in there, there is a bot, an intelligent bot that is assessing David and David's needs and interests. And the bot recommends to him to start with the basics and to start using some sleep exercises at night. And so he thinks that sounds pretty good, and that's what he does. Next slide. As he's been using this, these start to become a bit of a habit for him. And he's been doing a pretty good job of using this every day. So he's feeling pretty confident in himself. Next slide. But the bot is picking up some different signals, and the bot is picking up both from his responses, the way he is interacting with the app, and some sensors that he might benefit from some additional interventions. And in this case, keep in mind that everything that he has done so far is all through technology. There's no humans. And in this case, he's suggesting that David would benefit from some group meditation and some peer exchanges. And so now what is going to happen is he's going to participate in some group events, and then he's going to be engaged in a peer exchange analysis that's starting to leverage things like CBT for anxiety. Next slide. And he's really enjoying this because he's getting a chance to learn from others that have some similar anxieties that he has. He started a new job, so he's able to share some stories with others. And so we're starting to leverage community, which again lowers the cost because that's free. The fact that it's a group service lowers the cost because we have a one-to-many type of engagement. Next slide, Whitney. And now he's feeling like he's really quite good. And the bot, because he's been using it enough, has enough data that the bot starts giving him information about how he's doing. And in this example, it's actually telling him that his sleep patterns have improved and he's waking less in the night. And those were some of the goals that he originally signed up for. Next slide. But then something happens in his life, as it does to all of us. And in this case, his mother passes away, and he feels that he needs more help than just his own self-guided help. And he wants to work with a therapist. Next slide. And so again, the bot, which we happen to have named Headspace as a care assistant, the bot understands what the situation is, searches for people that would be the best fit for him, makes a recommendation, and then he's able to actually have a one-on-one session digitally with the therapist. And by the way, when he engages with the therapist can of course see any of the information within the app that David chooses to share with him. And so now he's been able to have that experience. And what David has is, in a single location, through technology, the ability to do self-guided tours, the ability to engage in a community, to attend courses with instructors, and to have a therapist whenever he needs one. Next slide, Whitney. That was the story that caused us to build what we've built. And then I wanted to just offer up a couple other things that are more about the toolkits that are out there that make this so incredibly easy. So with Apple's Health Kit and of course permission, we're able to leverage so much information about a person's health. And the example you're seeing here is one that we did to attach to our movement mode, where we can now make recommendations on what kinds of exercises or movements somebody should be doing during the day just by leveraging their health data. And the next slide. And this one is super interesting too, because now we're able to leverage audio and natural language processing in some new ways, where the member can speak into the app, and the app is not only doing the speech to text conversion, but is picking up sentiment. And from that sentiment, similar to how we pick it up from the keyboard strokes, from that sentiment is able to make the recommendations to them. And then I think I have just a last slide. I'm sorry, I may have gone on a little bit long, but I wanted this one here because of the outcome it showed. So this was us doing a test to see if explain why in AI really matters versus just simply, showing somebody a selection based on analyzing their data. And explain why is so powerful, because as humans, we need to understand why I saw what I saw. And what you can see here is same scenario, but when we applied the explain why, we saw a 66% increase in complete finishes, which is an incredible increase for the same path. We just explained why they were seeing it. And that was my kind of story, and I realized it was a bit of a pitch on why I would love for people in technology to focus on mental health, because in all seriousness, the problem is enormous, and it's enormous around the world. If you just look at the situation that we've been facing in India, where we've made Headspace free, because it's such a dire situation there. There are so many opportunities to make a difference in the world, and technology is absolutely central to this. And so my pitch was, if you are looking for a career in technology and you have any interest in mental health, please come to Headspace. So Paul, thank you for allowing me to do a pitch there.
I can't ask for a better pitch, CeCe. Thank you. Delightful to hear from you. I am struck by just how much you've talked about using AI to really augment the professionals in this space and to make it more accessible to more people. It's really an important problem, and I appreciate you and your team taking this on. Folks, if you would like to ask questions, feel free to post those in the chat. If you've got a question you want to raise a hand and ask live, you can feel free to raise a hand, and I'll invite Diana to summarize questions for you and to call in folks. I'll start with a question though, as you think about you're recommending these interventions of various kinds. Is there some mechanism in the tool set to try to ensure that you assess the results? My intervention with a group therapy session may be different than yours, and how do you continue to tune that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we do now. And by the way, as I mentioned, this didn't even exist when I got here. And so we're still in early stages, but I am impressed with how much they've gotten done. So we use the PSS score, which is a stress score, but it is a self-reported stress score. And we get about 30% of the members that will give us that score, which we think is pretty good. And so we can start that at the beginning of a session. We measure it, not at an individual's coaching session, but a series that they've been recommended. And then we check it at the end. We also do sensors. So, we look at things like your heart rate, anything that you've given us access to, we use those as sensors or signals, I guess is what we call them, to assess, where you were before and where you were after. And then we're able to begin to tie those things together as correlation to reductions in stress or anxiety. And then we do clinical studies. So, historically, all of our work has been based on clinical studies, and we have at least 25 published and another 25 in the works. And that's great because that teaches us the content and flow, but we want to do it in real time so we can adjust the recommendations that we're giving to you in a more real-time format.
Got it. Thanks. Diana, what questions do we have for CeCe?
Yes, we have one here, and just as a reminder, feel free to type your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to be invited to unmute yourself. We have a question here that is about the platform and how do you differ from some others like Calm or Insight Timer? Is it the AI?
Yeah, first of all, those are great companies, and I love the work that they do. What Headspace is known for is critical expertise backed by science. So for us, the science component is super important. Calm is a bit more of a lifestyle type company, whereas again, we're more science-based. The efficacy of our studies is really important to us. And we are now a platform that can deliver a stepped care approach. So in May and June, we launched our very first pilot for coaching and therapy and a digital assistant, which is what enables us to move up and down that continuum. Today, it's early for us, so I can't tell you that we're at scale on that, but at least we've launched and I want to mention something about that, proven that we can do it. And our adoption rates were really high because the Headspace brand is so recognized. Today, everything is more of a point solution. So like I said, Calm is much more of a lifestyle company around meditation, not into the coaching and the therapy aspects of it. And then you might have somebody like, Ginger or Modern Health that is deep into the therapy, or Lyra deep into the therapy aspects of it, but nobody has connected the full platform, and that's what we're focused on.
Another question, with the continued implementation and use of electronic health record systems in healthcare in general, and specifically mental health, are you seeing better diagnosis in the AI component as a result of the assessment by the provider?
I think what this is asking, and this was something I made reference to, but I want to make sure I'm answering the question. I think what this is asking is, as you aggregate data and you feed the AI models, it works better for, say, a bot, a digital assistant, but it also goes to the clinician. And so it helps the clinician. So they benefit from the AI model just as much as a digital assistant would. And so if that's the question, I think that's a huge part of helping them to be much more accurate in their diagnosis. And so yes, we see this as available for both sides to do a better job on diagnosis and a better job on prescribing, because what happens, you know, while the assistant will prescribe a set of content or a set of routines for the member, if we brought a coach into the process, they're also going to get that same recommendation. Now, of course, they can override and make some suggestions from it, but that will further teach the AIs.
Great, thank you. Can you tell us more about the integration with Teams and how businesses can use that data to assess their employees' mental health and well-being?
Yeah, it's brand new. So it was announced in September. It went live in June, and it sits in Teams. And today, because it's very early, and I'm really sorry about that noise, but my dog is tearing up things, and you're all the benefit of that right now. But it is using the behavior in Teams today. So it's looking at how long you've been in a meeting, how long you've been in Microsoft Outlook or whatever, you know, program you're using from Microsoft, and it's using that to make recommendations on taking a break or using breathing exercises. We are not yet to the point where we're also able to indicate whether someone might be stressed at work, but that's a beautiful outcome for us to focus on.
Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions. What are the state level initiatives in California in support of work to improve mental health in the senior community?
Wow, that's a really important question, and I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you that we work with LA County Mental Health, and much of our focus to date has been veterans and now the education system and healthcare providers. So, on the senior piece of it, I have to do some looking on it, but you know, we made our offering free to all LA County health providers, and we are one of my personal missions with the company is to make it free. It's already free for educators, but make it free for students 13 to 18 years old, so that we can teach them better habits than the rest of us, and maybe they'll be better than the rest of us. And so we are on a process for that, and we are working specifically with the state of California for their education system. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Khan Academy, which, you know, anybody has kids would be familiar with Khan Academy, but we're also partnered with Khan Academy to get the content out.
Wow, that's great. We have one more question here. So again, platform specific. Is it a membership or subscription? And are the fees oftentimes covered by insurance?
It is a subscription, but we refer to it as a membership because, which I guess could be one and the same, because we refer to our Headspacers as members. And in the employer space, it is covered by the employer, which is amazing because, you know, it's just great that employers recognize the number of hours that are lost. Absenteeism is huge because of stress. And then the costs that are associated with that, as well as employee engagement and turnover. So I'm thrilled that this is now, we have 2,200 enterprises, you know, that's large corporations who have deployed us free to their employees, which is amazing. And then health plans like Cigna, we just are launching with the Blues in California. So it's beginning to be covered by health plan payers as well. Although I didn't mean for that to be a pitch on Headspace. Whether it's Headspace or any offering, it is starting to get much more acceptance from the health plan providers.
CeCe, I can see we have to admire your mental health skills just managing the stress of the dog. So good show. If you've got time for a couple more questions, I saw a couple more on the queue. So yeah, if you've got time for those, that'd be great. And Diana, ball's in your court.
Sure. And any questions that we're not able to get to, we will save those and do our best to follow up. A question, are there plans to offer assistance in multiple languages?
Yes, we are in 6 languages today. We're in 190 countries, but keep in mind that we're in 190 countries because it happens organically. You know, one of the things that happens, Paul was saying that he saw us on Netflix. So we have a series on Netflix, and the viewership is largest outside of the US, which is super interesting. And so we get picked up easily. You know, people do subscriptions outside of the country because of that. But we have physical locations primarily in Europe, obviously Canada and Australia, and now India.
All right. This is our final question. How are you securing the back-end data since it's all HIPAA? I'm guessing databases that are encrypted.
Well, we have gone through the arduous process of being HIPAA and high trust compliant. So anybody who's gone through that exercise, it is a lot of work, but we've gone through that so that we're ensuring that we have all the data privacy rules in place. And even, you know, when we go into other countries, because of where data is stored, we have to address those issues as well. And of course, that's one of the reasons that you see us in the countries that we're in today.
All right, Diana, thank you for orchestrating that. CeCe, thank you for the presentation. This is great. And thank you to your team, Whitney particularly for tonight, and to the support team at Cal Lutheran. So thanks, and thanks to all of you for being here. I know there are others of CeCe's former colleagues and other folks who are here just because they care about the topic. And we're glad to have you. And thank you all for being here, and take care and stay well and stay mentally well.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
You bet, our pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.